So welcome to another POFcast. I'm Rob Lancaster.
I am Minagano Kape.
And I'm David Vincent.
And we are almost at the end of 2025, which means that somehow it's a year since we did the review of 2024. And as such, we have a lot of activities, reflections, moments to cover. And so that's what we're going to do today. Look back on some of the areas that we've treated in individual dedicated podcasts throughout the year, as well as some of the reflections that have emerged along the way as a function of that. But to kick off, as always, with some reflections on peace more generally from our comings and goings of the last little while. So who would like to kick off?
I can start. I have this image in my head or in my mind when I was leaving Juba recently, a few weeks ago, and all of a sudden I can see lots of constructions happening across at the airport. Even just the departure lounge was just so crowded in a way, and I relate that basically when we see constructions or a development. People talk of development goes with peace. You need a stable environment where you can do constructions. And so for me, I felt peaceful, or I saw signs of peace as in the construction that was going on around the airport.
Great. Minagano?
Well, for me, it is driving from Bor to Juba last month after the ICJS meeting. And we stopped by one of the villages where they do fish smoking, and I understand there's a very big fish market in Bor. And when we stopped at that village, you realize it's not only South Sudanese that are there. The people from different nationalities living their life, fishing by the riverside and smoking their fish for business. And I think also it reminded me of the huge potential that Bor has when it comes to fish market, and I understand they even export to the East African country. But also when you try to look at that, the opportunities that it has created to the local, it is immense. And if there's peace, then more and more people can be able to do that and really elevate the economic status by fishing.
Very good. And mine is from a little before that it was such a sensation, let's say, in my mind that I'll mention it, was when we went up to UI with David and Mick and Simon to then go on to see Dakweth in Bear. But we had to do it before, in other circumstances, we might have once it was all dried up. So there's swamp pretty much the whole way. And once you get into the sort of the depths of it, as it were, it's so quiet, so peaceful. The birds are there, and you just kind of glide through the water. And these amazing women, just in case it seems like we're making claims of being these hardcore travelers, these women were carrying our bags at their insistence, and they somehow on their heads have these bags and just glide through the water for hours. And I think both something about the beauty of the nature there and the quietude and everything, very striking. And not necessarily something I would do every day, but it's the sort of thing that I think in due course tourists will pay a lot of money to experience in different parts of South Sudan. So
I think that's quite interesting because I saw pictures of you, and in one moment I'm like, this is a very difficult walk, but at the same time it's a very beautiful scenery.
Yeah, it was spectacular. Particularly early morning before it gets hot. Once it gets hot and the lights reflecting off the water, it's a bit of a different story. But that first flush of the day, very nice indeed. This maybe dovetails a little bit into reflecting back on the year, not systematically, but just to some of the memorable moments throughout the year, and that stick in our mind before we then get into some of the more activity-oriented things that have been going on and what that all means for the process. So in terms of memorable moments, perhaps starting with you, David.
Yes, so I recall this very vividly. In February this year, so Peace Canal, Rumbek team and the Kwajok team, they've asked Rob and I to come and help with the orientation of the new akut for the Cuiebet and the Tonj. And so because we've done this before with the Rumbek akut or the greater Rumbek, we wanted to use similar sort of a process that we had applied before that have worked for over 4 years. So during the orientation, there's
Just
one
remind
particular...
people briefly what the akut is.
Yes. So the akut is the Dinka language. The phrase basically means the grassroots peace committee. And these are the cattle camp army youth leaders that are turned into peace builders, basically. So we met in Rumbek. We brought the Cuiebet, Akut, and then we also brought the Tonj, Akut, the Tonj South, and it was quite incredible. So the 4-day process that we went through, and one moment to close off the phase of looking at the impact of the conflict and how we feel, what is happening in our communities, and what is happening with us individually. That journey of transformation, we had to pause and do a ritual that will mark that phase. And the ritual was the ritual performance was based on each akut is asked to pick a twig or something they can burn, and then we lit the fire, and there was a circle around. So there was a fire that was lit by rope, and then there was that moment of silence. And then at the end of that ritual, at the end of the fire, there was that moment that we asked if anyone want to share anything before we return into the hall. And all of a sudden, everyone is like, no, this is a very good moment. So no one wants to say anything. And then this one guy put up his hand and said, no, I want to talk. And there was a bit of resistance. But then he insisted, I want to talk. And boy, what he said was quite incredible. He said, look, all through these 3 days, I was really reflecting more on, I want to take a revenge. And I had worked out a plan in my head. At the back of this orientation or this workshop, I was going to carry out this revenge attack. And now this is so powerful for me that I want to inform all of you now, I'm not going to do that. I will pursue the path of peace, and I want to become a peace builder. That was a very powerful moment, and that sits with me for the rest of the year.
Thanks, David. Minagano.
Well, mine is a moment in May when I spent about a week, 5 days or so in Bichibich, a very remote part of GPAA, where there is a community center, and it was our first time to have flights with passengers to get there and to also have interaction with the communities. So at some point it rained, and then we had to stay longer in Bichibich. And after all the community meetings, visiting people, we just now, what can we do? And the 2 extra days that I spent there, I was sitting more with the young girls who are helping in the center to cook. And in that moment, they shared a lot of their stories. And one that stuck with me is of a very young girl. She might be 21 if she's old. And just to realize at 21, she's a mother of 4 and she is a widow, because the story is her husband was killed in one of the cattle raidings. So it's not a very beautiful story. It's a sad one, but for some reason it stuck with me, just reflecting on how conflict or intercommunal conflict in a way affects a lot of people, very young girls who have potential to contribute positively in their communities. Now they're widows with a lot of responsibilities, and still they have to carry on with their lives.
Yeah, the reality of the trajectory of these folks in some of these remote areas. Mine is less human in one sense, but also very human in another sense. To maybe go back a step with this Jonglei-GPAA process, if we go back to Pierre and in all those first meetings that we had afterwards with the three languages, when we were out in the meetings, it would be, someone speaks and then it's translated into the next language and then the next language and then the next language. And I think it was about a couple of years ago now that we first thought, maybe we need to look at the possibility of getting interpreting equipment so that we can leverage the technologies that's there to facilitate these channels of communication for efficiency and also for the effectiveness of the conversations. And so we hired from Uganda actually, and a technician came across, all very expensive, but it was great. And everyone appreciated it. But the first time the technician had all this complicated equipment, so we thought, it would be great if we could do this ourselves, but that all seems too complicated. And so then the next time we invested again in the equipment and got the technician across, but this time little did he know it would be to his peril, but he brought a much simpler system. And so we could see, maybe we could do this ourselves. And so then, what was the first meeting? It was at the women's conference. We purchased the equipment, and it works brilliantly, perhaps even better than the equipment we were hiring, and we can use it every time. And it's very simple. And now everyone's starting to get into this flow of how it works and getting used to it. And we just had the third time we used it in taking it to Bor for the ICGS. Sometimes don't have enough of the headsets to go around for all, particularly the English speakers, but for that process between the languages, just creates another layer of possibility to the conversations, and also how much we can get through in a short space of time. So being a bit of a nerd on these things, enjoyed that step. And I think the interpreters enjoy it too, as well, which is fun.
Oh yeah, they love it. They love it. It's amazing. It's actually one of the things that when you walk into a meeting room, you could see this. It looks very UN-like or sophisticated kind of environment. Everyone with that.
Yeah, and I don't know. It seems like we are the only ones in Juba with this. I'm not sure, but I've not seen this in any meetings.
Yeah, so maybe we need to put an advert out there for anyone if they want interpreting equipment for your meetings. Any other memorable moments?
I think I have one, Rob. This is so just before the 8th ICGS, the Intercommunal Governance Structure meeting in Bo. So Gulej was as a participant from the Murle, he came a bit early with the team, so he drove with Peace Canal team all the way to Bor. And so there was about 2 to 3 more days before the rest of the participants of the Murle arrived. And so Guled, usually in these meetings, the ICGS meetings in the past, Guled and Malak will have this sort of a tension between them. And often on the first day, there's that sort of debate and sort of like they will be saying things about their community and protection of their community. Anyway, so I had this lovely a view or the picture of Goulet and Malak, because since Goulet came earlier, we asked Malak to come and welcome him. And so Malak came in for a visit and they sat together. And the rest of the Peace Canal team and us were sitting on the side, and the two of them just sitting there talking, having a conversation, deep conversation, actually in Dinka. People will be surprised that Goulet is actually very fluent in Dinka. And that picture, when I look at it, I thought, this is the future. Or this is the future. This is what we are working towards. The intention of everything we have is when we don't see tribes, we don't see different people, we see one community, two community elders and leaders who are just going about talking about their community's welfare and their people in such a very peaceful environment. It stuck with me.
Yeah, amazing. And the contrast as well between that image and, as you described, the arguments that they'd previously been getting into at every meeting. So then to broaden it out from these snapshots to some of the kind of key activities that have happened this year, what are some of the ones that have really moved or felt like they've moved things in a positive direction? It's always hard to assess how much we're actually making progress or not, but those activities where we feel like, okay, a step was taken here, what are the ones that you would hone in on?
For me, I would think of the women's conference, the Jonglei-GPAA Women's Conference, and it's the first of its kind to bring women from this region together to have conversation. And that particular activity, it came from some of the resolutions of the ICGS meetings when the women members of the ICGS said they want to have a space where they will sit by themselves and also discuss and have a strategy on how they can contribute to issues of peace, especially when it comes to issues of identification and recovery of abducted children. And so after the ICGS, we organized that for a very first time. And there's so many stories around it. First of all, from women from Motot walking for hours or working twice from one location to another just to be able to catch the plane so that they will be part of that meeting. I think that was such a highlight, and it shows also some of the commitment that the women in the grassroots have when it comes to the peace work that that they contribute to or that we do together with them. And even after the meeting, because it was a huge one in Juba and it was live streamed, people on social media were able to contribute to the overall process. And after the meeting, the women from Uror, one of the women leaders, said, look, we said in the meeting, we've made a commitment that we would like to contribute towards identification of children. So one of the women is like, I would like to run a campaign in my community that will encourage people to identify and to recover children that were abducted. And she did that. And in the last ICGS meeting, she was able to like really identify, and about 8 children were recovered. So to me, it also shows that now the women are saying, and they have been saying, because if we go back to Perry, when they said they have a role, they can contribute towards recovery of children, and they were very intentional during the conference, and we have seen that they have taken an action. So to me, I think this is a great one that really we need to see how we can continue to accompany the women in some of the things that they have the strength or the leverage within their communities to be able to push further and further.
Yeah, and that
I saw this, Rob. I think it's a photo taken by you of women in the traditional wear called lawa, and they're all sitting in a circle. It's such a beautiful. I wasn't at the conference, but that photo sort of stuck with me. It looks very beautiful.
Yeah. David and I were tossing the coin who would go to Rumbek to accompany the embassy on the visit to Rumbek, and who would stay for the women's conference. And I think I lucked out to be there for the conference. And just, I mean, maybe it's back to memorable moments, but it's that same circle at the end, David, when we had the conversation with everyone, how we would facilitate that final closing session, and whether it would be more speeches from government or whatever, or whether we would do it in the spirit of what the whole conference had been about, which is really the women speaking. And I think it was as simple as there was a microphone in the middle and anyone could speak for 2 minutes, including the government, but they got no privileged opportunity to speak. And I think in the end, it was only women speaking. The government sat there. There were a couple of donors who were there who just sat and listened to what was being shared. It was really, kind of powerful image again. Great. So what else?
Yes, so I want to pick on the Nanaam establishment, and just to give a quicker background. Nanaam, literally, it's this stretch of a river that ran across through the greater Bibor administrative area, and that sort of almost split GPA from others. So that's the Nanaam. It's the river. And in 2021, during the Piri Peace Conference, it was the issue of the sporadic attacks became, the persistence of that, it became an issue. And so in the discussion, there was almost like a hope that we could push, or the partners and the government and the community could push a little bit to have presence in these areas. These areas are there because of the river and the green pasture around it. You see most of these ASETs groups, they will be camping along the river as a source of water for their wildlife or wild animals, their cattle. And then there's a source of fish, a source of a lot of things. So that's where they congregate. And so there is no government presence in these areas. So some of these young men would venture into the forest and carry out these sporadic attacks that became a nuisance to the Dinka Boer and also the Nuer. And so the hope was that we need to have presence in these areas, and together, POF Peace Canal and all the other partners saw the importance of these. And so we began to work towards establishing these centers, right? So these centers, there were 2 centers that have been established in the middle of nowhere. When I say middle of nowhere, it's literally in the middle of nowhere. We have the Wuno, which is on the side of the Kwangli side, and then we have the Bichibich, which is on the side of the Gumruk, facing the two, like the Gumruk one facing the Greater Dinka Boer area, the Bichibich, and then we have the Likwangule or Wuno facing on that side of the Greater Law, basically. And our presence there, we have some makeshifts, just to paint a picture, we have not established and build like a very permanent. It's a very small structures that are established there. There's airstrip, and then we have the humanitarian hub, again temporary. So that sort of a move really it's been a major highlight. And all of a sudden, then we have WFP, for example, and other partners going into these areas and establish their distribution centers there. And that started to begin to bring hope. And as Minagano mentioned earlier, when we had organized to have a chartered flight land, let's say in Bichibich, it was quite incredible. So for us, this is it's an investment that we need to keep working towards with the government and other partners to ensure that our presence are in these areas, to ensure that we are able to engage the right youth, we are able to engage these youth that are carrying out these sporadic attacks. And I can say it's a working in progress. We haven't yet really succeeded quite well. However, you could see that we are engaging the right youth, and the reduction of the attacks, you could feel it as being reported during the ICGS meeting. So this is one of the key highlight of the work that Peace Canal, POF, and the other partners have been investing in.
Yeah, which and some of those challenges link back to Minagano, the kind of image you were sharing of those communities and the women and the loss and challenges in that respect, and links to what we might come back to a bit later in the podcast around the challenges with resources and sustainability of all these initiatives, which are moving in the right direction, but will be hard to sustain without further investment of some sort to consolidate the progress that has been that's been made. Yes.
No, another thing that I think about is the meeting, the documentary that we premiered. When was it? Was it July?
Yeah,
July.
June. Yeah.
End of June, early July. And I think it's a documentary that it's on YouTube. I think our listeners will get to watch it. It's a documentary that captures the journey of these 3 communities through the lens of the Piri Peace Agreement and the ICGS meetings that bring together these communities to evaluate and to hold each other accountable and to see what needs to be done. But to me, the premiere event in Juba was huge. It was massive. I remember at the start we were panicking, will people come and will we have enough people? At the end we have over 100 people. The hall was full and people were standing
200
outside. 200, yeah. That's
yes.
Yeah, people were standing outside, and the feedback, and because to me it did not only end there, we continued to screen it in other venues on a smaller setting, university, the Swiss Tukul for different audience to get to interact with this. And usually the feedback that I get is that actually we read reports, but looking at this 30 minutes documentary, it gives us a proper imagery of the context that Jonglei and GPA is all about. Sometimes these things are not properly captured in the report, and people are able to like really resonate in a very emotive, from an emotive angle, but also in a very objective angle, because these communities have spoken, they have shared their vision for peace, and people are able to really look at it in terms of a journey that these communities have been taking and their commitments. Usually people get a lot of news from the social media, and the image of Jonglei-GPAA or Nuer and I mean Murle and Dinka that is portrayed in the media, it's very negative, that it's almost impossible to even imagine that there's something positive about it. But what I like about the documentary is that it created a balance of, yes, there are bad things happening, but also these communities are committed to peace. These communities have been working together. These communities are taking small steps within their individual capacities to see that there is peace between themselves and within themselves. So these kinds of stories, usually they don't get shared often. And I find it fascinating when sometimes I get a random text from someone who said, oh, I have just watched the documentary and this is what I thought, you should screen it more. It's really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just underline it. I think one of the things I like about it is that it's not trying to tell some story of some success that we've achieved. It's just telling a story of a process that's going on, and it's had various ups and downs along the way and will continue. But is a lot of food for thought, including visually. And I think it's getting up to 1,000 views on YouTube, which I think for the niche viewership of South Sudan is not bad. So if you haven't watched it yet, anyone, you're missing out, clearly. So, and it's probably an opportune moment to take a little bit of a break in our conversation on the year in review. We've been building up quite a bit of momentum on positive stories and moments. We'll continue with a couple of highlights after the break and then dive into some of the challenges that we've had over the course of the year before wrapping up with some hopes and priorities for the year ahead. We'll be back in a moment.
Ina mela algarja daido. Mi shikaben ba ognang. Barami te baran ba gadana, baran ba gadana. Koya rube nok. Koya midyot. Koya dianok.
The conflict that we are trying to resolve now, it's like 100 years conflict. If you resolve the Jonglei-GPAA situation, you would have resolved 60% of South Sudan conflict.
Katanya ne kabil kagorde nalia kato wala tinche neru waka wada kamaget kimboye ba kam leke mondoche kanoma.
So welcome back. We'll crack on with some of the highlight activities that we feel have moved things forward a little bit before we get into the messy world of the challenges. So what else has been key in the activity front this year?
Yeah, so Rob, I wanted to highlight as POF, we look at this, the issue on sustainability and the ownership is quite important as a way of how we work, and so with even our partner Peace Canal. So the Akut training, and just before I go into that, the Akut, as I mentioned earlier, it's a grassroots peace committee. And we have two structures that we want to do. I mean, the two structures that strengthen the community's ownership and sustainability. One, on the Jonglei-GPAA side, we have the intercommunal governance structures that is established right after the PRA peace agreement to sort of hold each other accountable in a way and take over the ownership of the process that is happening. And then on the Lakes state and also Warab side, we have the Akududor, which is the grassroots peace committee that would basically, these are the cattle camp armed youth that will go on. So in February this year, we've, after testing the work of Akududor of the Greater Rumbek or Greater Dinkagar, we very quickly, there was a call by the neighboring communities, especially on the Rumbek north side, the Luanjang are calling and say we need a similar sort of a system, and then also the calling on the Toin south side, and then also on the Cuiebet side. So finally, we were able now to establish this committee, and the establishment of this committee is not just random picking of the individuals that are turned into a corridor. These are the cattle camp youth leaders, the key decision leaders in the cattle camps, that if anything happens, they are the one that will lead or instigate conflict or lead conflict. So we were able to bring them all together in Rumbek, the corridor of the Cuiebet and the Tonj, and it was quite an incredible 4 days kind of a process of transformation, which I had mentioned earlier in one of the memory thing that I've mentioned. So this is quite incredible work. And I just wanted to say one last part of this. I think as I emphasize on the idea of the ownership and the communities taking responsibility, I think what we have seen the Akududor of Greater Dikagar have done, I think it's the real possibility. When you strengthen these local structures, you could see that there are a lot of things that they can take on with the support of the government and resolve them.
Yeah, and just underlining that last point, seeing in terms of ownership, seeing the way in which during the process, it's not really a training, the process of orientation for the Chodet Akudor, the way in which the Dinka Ga Akudor really were there to give, I think there were 3 through the whole process to give their input. And then on the last day, we had 15 or 20 or so who came for the lunch and the session before, and really, what's the word? Really passionately sharing with the Cuiebet Akudor their experience of this process and what is important to focus on, lessons of how they've done it. So this transfer of experience and orientation from community to community that reflects a level of ownership that is what we're driving at as well.
Yeah, and Rob, if I would just come in very quickly on one of the highlights of the year, which is the cattle trading. If I could just put that in very quickly. But before I talk about cattle trading, when we started our initiative during POF1, we had the peace caravan where we took youth from different villages to different villages. The Murle, the Dinka, and the Nuer. And in POFTAP, I remember this, and I don't know whether you remember this, Rob. Achop, our great youth leader from Murle side, he got so overwhelmed by the process itself. And so when he got a chance to address the crowd, he got up and said, look, everything you are doing is right, and I love peace, and I do all that. However, now, how can I eat peace? Do I eat peace? The reasons why I sort of go for raiding and abduct children is because I need to feed my 3 wives at home. And so how do I eat peace now? And I think that question stuck with us for a very long time. And of course, in the POF second phase, the emphasis came in, okay, what can we do to improve on the livelihoods, activity side of stuff and empower these youth, give them an alternative, things that they need to do. And so the cattle trading idea came, and we piloted in Uror. And the idea basically is a roving funds where a certain amount of money is given to youth, and then they will trade with it. They will trade, buy cattle, sell cattle, buy cattle, sell cattle for about 4 to 5 months, and then that is passed on to another youth. And we based this, we wanted to concentrate this first to test it. We piloted with the youth leaders of the Uror, and I think the success of it really was quite profound. And all of a sudden now, that has grown to go to the Greater Dinkabur side and also on the Greater Murle side, and the success of it is quite incredible in a sense. So the cattle trading, I think it's a very great initiative for me. I see that if we can continue to put in more more resources, it will pull the youth a little bit away from some of these attacks. Of course, we can't reach every youth, but I think with the little number we have invested in so far, it's been quite powerful process.
Yeah. What I also like about the cattle trading is really also on the system that has been created in to ensure that there's accountability for this youth that will receive this fund to enable them to business. Because there are cases where, very few cases where one person would try not to give back the money, but there's a system within the community where they are held accountable by the youth structures within the community, by the commissioners. And because I remember a couple of weeks ago, there were 2 youth, I don't remember from which area, who did not return their revolving fan. But then their Payam began to see that, okay, if they don't, their youth from within our Payam who are not benefiting, then now they push these 2 people who are initially refusing to return the money, to return that money so that additional youth from their communities can be able to benefit from that fund. So to me, I feel like that local system of accountability is very good in terms of sustainability of this program, because they know this is theirs. If they don't hold themselves accountable, then they're the ones losing. Yeah.
So that captures some of the Livelihoods Lab initiatives, and we had a whole POFcast earlier in the year with both Robert, who's leading the Livelihoods Lab work, and Minagano on the peace building side, talking in more detail about some of that. And there are some figures on the website too around some of the initiatives and the economic viability of them too, which is fundamentally what needs to be there. There can't just be more seed funding initiatives that don't have a sustainable model behind them. So that's been a key preoccupation of the Livelihoods Lab work. Maybe we can shift gears a little bit to this FLIP initiative, which was begun earlier this year. It feels like a long time ago now, but I think it was actually only March. It was 9 months ago or so. So the concept there was a little bit coming out of the NGO capacity development side of things and saying, okay, well, that's important to develop institutions and support them, accompany them in that process of becoming more and more resilient in all ways, and technically more effective. And then at the same time, what we noticed was there are lots of individuals around the system who are in whatever institution they happen to be, and sometimes a few years in one and then a few years in another, doing really good work. And how could there be a program that could come in and kind of strengthen their own individual, in a way, foundations for supporting effective work, whether it be in peace building or even other domains, some of the first participants. So I think we started with a cohort of around 24, putting some quite blunt or strict, let's say, parameters around the commitment, and it's been a significant commitment. So there's been a bit of attrition of those who've among those who've enjoyed but have felt that they couldn't sustain necessarily the commitment in a few phases. So starting with an in-person meeting we had in March, then we had a few online engagements, a second in-person meeting in August, and then there's been these action learning groups online for 3 groups that have been going through this peer-to-peer process before we have a final in-person meeting next year. Sharing a little bit of that framework, because we haven't done a dedicated POFcast on the FLIP yet, which maybe we should do, but Minagano is one of the participants. So I don't know, Minagano, whether you want to talk a little bit about the experience of it beyond this kind of boring explanation of what it entails that I've just given.
No, the explanation gives it the background and the basics. We just finished our last action learning groups meeting on Friday. I remember when I was coming from Bibor, and we had a lot of reflection as a group in terms of what we have learned over the course of the year. And to me, when I'm thinking about it now, there's so many learnings. First of all, to be in a smaller group, and then you're able to share some of the things that you're working on and how you can be supported as a leader. It sounds easy, but sometimes it's not easy. To me, it felt like you're sitting in a hot seat, but then the good thing is there's fire, but then it doesn't devour you, because you know that your team members, their goal is to support you. Their goal is to help you find answers to some of the challenges that you face as a leader, or to find a different way of doing things, because sometimes we got to realize, like, generally from our reflection, is that the idea that as leaders you need to have all the answers, and in our reflections, in our exchange, we also get to realize that the more you try to make the space of answers and decision making open to other people, then that means you also share the risk and the challenges that comes with it. So sometimes we feel stuck because we think we need to have the answers, and if the answer is wrong, then you are accountable. But then if it is a group, if it's a facilitative process of finding solution, then if it is good, we all benefit from it. But then if we also do not get things correct, then we also share the responsibility of moving forward or taking things in a different direction. So I would say it's a process that have, in our group particularly, it has challenged us. Some of the things that we think we know as leaders, just understanding that there's no one way to doing things. And the beauty with the flip is you present your case or what you're working on, and you're supported, and you immediately go to try to implement some of the recommendations that your colleagues shares with you, and then you get to come back to them and reflect whether they have worked, whether they have not worked, and the ones that have not worked, why do you think it has not worked? And you just get this continuous sort of, I want to call it even co-mentorship, because I want to believe that within the same peers you can mentor each other in a way. So that space of co-mentorship was really great. And also the beauty with it was we're not all from the same institution. So we have people from different institutions. So that also brought on board different experiences, different learnings, and different challenges. So in a way, it challenged all of us. I think I'm looking forward to the next meetup to get to hear from everyone how it went in their group, but also to like have a reflective moment over the year. How has it also changed or influenced our ways of leading and how we handle things as individuals? Yeah, but it was a beautiful space.
Can I just add, Rob? I think this process, it's good to mention here Buff, who is actually facilitating this process, and is quite incredible. He has this way of really working with you to get to where you want to go without giving you those answers you want. And I think the incredible work that Buff have put into bringing these individuals where they are, it's quite a process, because for the flip to succeed, yes, we have the participants, but I think the person who is holding the space or the general facilitator of the space is quite incredible.
Yeah, and I think I gather there's not for public consumption, but because the calls have been recorded for notes and stuff, he's generated some sort of summary for the different groups, which parts of which read almost like a leadership handbook, but it's entirely generated from the discussions that have happened in those groups of 5 or 6 or whatever it is. So just goes to show how much kind of insight and wisdom there is of people who are wanting to make a difference and wanting to, as you say, Minagano, kind of see ways forward and then see what other people have to say and take that on board, and then keep trying like we all are. So this is all sounding great, but we're devoting a lot of time to what certainly coming across to me as quite positive initiatives and engagements and so forth. So we need to turn to challenges, and yeah, what's getting in the way, or what has been getting in the way of the work, making it difficult, or maybe some of it's useful obstacles. I don't know. But what would you both say about some of the key challenges that have landed in our way? Maybe some of them constructed by us over the course of the last year.
I may perhaps I can start with one that is quite obvious, is the sort of the cut, the aid cut or the resource that is coming in particular when we look at the Jonglei-GPAA. When we first started out there, especially under the RSRCF, the funds that were really the UN trust funds that were really quite important to supplement and support some of the activities that we had mentioned earlier. And so that phase of the UN Trust Fund has come to an end, which actually leaves a few other agencies, including POF, that are still in the area, but I think we can't quite we don't have the resources to that extent that we could continue. So that's a great challenge that we have to continue to face. For example, I'll give you one example. Just to have one ICGS, or the intercommunal governance structures, we are looking like over 100,000 US dollars. And in the past, we'll get a lot of agencies contributing towards that to enable that platform for the community to continue to hold each other accountable. But all of a sudden now, all the other agencies, the funds have dried up, and it's becoming really very difficult for us to sort of continue to move that. And I just wanted to mention there is a lot of thinking that has been done in terms of what to be done next. And we have the Jonglei-GPAA strategy that was developed by all the partners, which is actually sitting on the side there as well. If anyone who is interested, you can read some of the thoughts and the collective ideas on how we can advance some of the work that is happening in Jonglei-GPAA. But I can say all the little success we have achieved so far, with all the partners, I think the great threat now is the funding cuts, and we don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, maybe just building on that point, I think there was it's been acknowledged around the world that there's an opportunity as well in these funding cuts to really take a step back and look at how we're going about things and what makes sense. Really embracing more the localization in a meaningful sense. And we maybe need a dedicated podcast on this and invite some other perspectives as well. But my sense is, and let me speak from the international side of things or perspective on things, that the response in South Sudan has been really disappointing, lacking imagination, almost trying to fit the same ways of working into a smaller envelope, the same level of interagency competition, the same inefficiencies and unwillingness to kind of see a bigger vision of what this could all look like, and a lot of disinterest really in the Jonglei-GPAA strategy, which was compiled by us, but it was written by the communities, and the content comes out of the content of these conversations, and I think just reflects where, as a sector, the international community is at present, and also potentially some of the mentality of those who are responsible for funds, and there's that opportunity is still there to have a more honest look at what's going on. But if it doesn't happen soon, then the ship will have sailed. And anyway, just thought I'd throw that in the mix. Chances are no international people will have listened for 45 minutes, but if they have, please do get in touch. We'd love to have a conversation with anyone about what this looks like.
Yeah. And I think the opportunities are not only for the internationals to look at, but also the government and the South Sudanese themselves. Because now, when we're talking about this, what came to mind was the recent concluded GPAA Chiefs Conference that was hosted by the chief administrator. And I remember he clearly said, our priorities is going to be farming, and WFP will not bring us food. And if WFP wants to get food, let them buy food from us. So to me, that's that kind of thinking. I don't know how it will be actualized into action, but that kind of thinking is just now the beginning of it. Communities need to be challenged to move away from the dependency of saying, okay, the problem is hunger, we have no food. What is the solution? Is it only WFP bringing us food? What is other ways of us addressing the issues of hunger without waiting for food to be brought to us? So I think it's really an important, and we just need more spaces for such conversations to happen as early as possible before we all get caught by surprise. I think we're already caught by surprise, but there's an opportunity to do things better. Yeah.
And Rob, if I could just move this to the next challenge that we looked at, and especially on the northern Jonglei side, a lot of the interventions that have been made by partners and all that, I think politically we are facing a massive challenge to continue to the peace efforts that we have. When we, the partners and the government, we are not synced together towards a clear objective, So the political differences, either nationally or subnationally, is catching up with some of the work that we are doing. And we have seen the differences of opinions and the ideologies between the SPLM-IO and the SPLM-IG has become really quite a challenge for us to manage, because we are already on the area. And in the recent weeks, we have seen a lot of the air bombardment to some of the location where we have been investing a lot of efforts in terms of peace. That scares of a lot of our community. The community sort of get distracted, and try to focus. And I think the government has its own intention, has its own modality on how they want to intervene. But I think as a peace builder, from peace builder perspective, and as a South Sudanese myself, I think there ought to be some conversation that need to be held at the national level to try to look at some of their ideas and intervention on how to prevent conflict. I think partners and the government, I think we need to come on the same table to look at what we do, or what we can do that doesn't cause more harm to the community. And as I can say, that areas around more toward areas that have been bombarded recently, it's been just quite incredible to see women and children being affected, and a lot of youth displacement and mistrust continue to grow. So this is something that I think we will be pushing towards, to create a platform to sit down with the government and say, look, how can we re-strategize? What is the message here? What can we do to prevent the innocent people getting caught in the line of this air bombardment? I think it's a huge challenge for us, and we ought to try to address it in a very amicable way.
Yeah, so we've got these different pieces, and it's almost like we're not yet finding, whether it's international, government, local, we're not yet finding the leverage points where it all comes together really effectively. Each having a kind of agenda that, as you say, David, has maybe an internal logic to it for that particular actor, but when it comes together in the context, is sometimes a bit counterproductive, to put it generously. So, yeah.
And it's as I said, it's a conversation we need to have. Sorry, come in, Minagano.
No, yeah, I agree. It's definitely a conversation we need to have. And in most cases, our colleagues who are based in the fields, they are really caught in the middle of this politics. Because in some instance now, it's not clear to them who to deal with. In some cases, there are more than one administrator. So who do we deal with it? How do we tread carefully without being labeled as being allies to this party and not to this party? But at the central part of it, it's the interest of the communities that they are really trying to work with it, really trying to serve the community. So it's really a difficult one. Related to the point of the government, another point that I would like to mention in terms of the challenges, I think over the years, it's been happening over the years and it's still continuing, is the constant changes in leadership. It has some implication on the work that we do, and we have also seen it this year. And sometimes it happens for the positive, but sometimes it also interrupts the plans that we have in place. For example, in Nanaam, when Bichibich was established, for a long time now, we've been talking about government presence in the government center that was constructed, but up to now that has not been achieved. And I think even before the changes in the government, there was a moment where there's this idea of a task force that will move on foot in all these communities to be able to disseminate messages of peace, to be able to engage with communities in the remote areas, so that issues of cattle raid and attacks are addressed. But these are some of the initiatives that now we have it on hold, because basically, I'm not trying to say the leadership is not interested in it, but the process of transition sometimes make things to stretch in terms of times, and then a lot of things are happening at the ground. If we're not able to move with certain things very fast, then it affects the whole conflict system that we work in. So this constant changes, I think, in a way, it affects our work.
Yeah, so there's lots of elements, and we could continue on talking about some of the climate adaptation challenges. There's a whole conversation around the ongoing role of the diaspora, which we covered, I think, even in earlier POFcasts, and there could be more to say there. This is all fascinating. We're probably testing the faithfulness of people who are listening right through. So maybe we can move just into the final minutes and look at what lies ahead over the coming year. POF continues until November, possibly might continue beyond that. We'll see. But firstly, maybe just are there some points we could touch on that in the broader context give us hope that as well as whatever we try to do, there is scope for these things to really move forward?
I think, Rob, what gives us hope, linked to what Minagano mentioned earlier in terms of the constant changes within the government. But at the moment, I think the synergy or the working relationship between His Excellency Dr. Riek Gai, the governor of Jonglei, and His Excellency Gola Boyoy of the Greater Bibo Administrative Area. I think these two, you could see, I think others may look at this really badly, but if you could see, it's almost like a father and a son kind of relationship where Dr. Riek, very experienced, prominent politician who have so much to say, and working closely with Gola, a young, energetic person that he really meant so well for his community. And I think in the last ICGS, we have seen how incredible the two work together and the synergies. And the back of that, the energy that he's putting into it, as Minagano mentioned earlier, he at the back of that, we supported a program where he brought all the chiefs, the Red Chiefs and the different asset group together and the commissioners, and really looking and saying, look, we have to be better. And for me, I think it gives us a lot of hope. And I hope that they will be given more chance so that we can keep working and achieve some of the work that we have.
Yeah. And I think what also gives me hope is the energy that we continue to see from the youth. Yes, we acknowledge that sometimes it's very difficult to achieve at the moment, like absolute no attacks and all that. These things continue to happen as our peace work continue. But I think there's also energy from the youth from this community to really try to see that there's peace between them. For example, in the ICGS meeting in Bor, Korawo was telling the Murle youth that use the cattle market in Anyidi, and I will guarantee protection for you. Of course, there's so much to unpack about it, but just coming forward, the courage to come forward and say, I am willing to take the step to take responsibility to ensure that there is an interaction between us that was positive. And the very recent one where the Murle youth have just crossed to a kobo as a sign of peace or a gesture to of peace with their Nuer neighbors. Of course, there are other challenges that came with it, but to me, these are all stories of courage that continue to give hope, that continues to tell us that despite the communities do not have total trust among each other, but just taking those steps is showing that they're willing to build that trust, even if it's difficult.
Absolutely.
No, that's absolutely, yeah, that's really good, Rob. If I can just squeeze in very quickly, I think for many years, we're really banging on this idea that we have to really look at women as partners in peace building. And I think what gives me a lot of hope, I would say, is in the reason, like from the Women's Conference to the last ICGS, women really stepping forward. And I can say it's been really very difficult for us to collect the abductees, the women and children that have been abducted, and for them to be returned. And the youth leaders, the chiefs, and the commissioners have all tried that. And we can now see the possibility that if we give this task to women, and we have seen an example of the Urur women leader who within 3 weeks of just going village to village, door to door, talking to women, and all of a sudden we were able to receive a number of abductees, and that work is going on. And I think the return of the children and women that have been abducted between these 3 communities really gives me hope that it can really cement the path towards a lasting peace that we wanted to achieve.
So on that note, what would you, after this conversation, you won't be held to it, but how would you characterize the kind of key priority for the coming year in terms of our work? We know there are many,
there are many, but I think one that I want to highlight very quickly is on the road openings. I think the dream that has been raised, I think I can't remember who in particular, we have to walk the peace rather than flying the peace around. And this is the call by the Cattle Camp youth themselves. And so we have this grand vision where we are going to walk for over 2 weeks across different communities for the three communities, walking for 3 weeks just from village to village and talking about peace and sharing what is happening. I think for me, that is a great priority for the next year. We're going to put in a lot of efforts, and we welcome everybody. We welcome the partners, we welcome the government, we welcome anyone who wishes to go on and trek with us. I think it will be quite incredible piece of work for next year. It will take a lot of organization, a lot of energy, of course, to look at. If you look at the geography of the Jonglei-GPAA, it's quite amazing. It's huge, and how we're going to cover it, I have no idea, but I have faith in us and the youth and the community.
So we're basically inviting people to go on a walk in one of the most beautiful parts of the world. What else do you want to do in February? Minagano.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one. And when I was in Bibor, it seems there's a lot of momentum for the road opening. And even the ladies from the Bridges of Peace said that they're going to join. So I imagine already February it will be all of us are walking, no one in the office. But
say even the ladies, Minagano, these ladies are hardcore walkers. What am I saying at the beginning about the swamps? Yeah. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah, and what I look forward for next year is also the Bridges of Peace program that we've not talked much about it here, but just after the second review, I'm looking forward to see what it will transition into. Because at the moment we're trying to put together a strategy to indicate some of the priorities for next year and how the program would look like. Already it has expanded to the site of Cuiebet and Tonge, which is positive, but just to see how we can push it further and to see it becoming an independent program and really doing the amazing things that they do.
Great. I'm not going to add. We've covered plenty. There's more that could be said, and there's more that will be said in POFcasts over the course of the coming year. For anyone who would like to read more, which everyone must be burning to read more after listening to all of this, if you've made it this far, we'll put some links in the description. And you can find lots on the blog on our website, and of course, as Minagano was advertising again, the meeting film, which if nothing else, as we said, provokes some thinking about processes in South Sudan at the community level, and what they can look like and what challenges they can throw up. We've probably spent less time on the challenges, although covered some of them, but let's justify that because we're called the Peace Building Opportunities Fund, not the Peace Building Challenges Fund. And that's a cop-out just to end on. And thanks, Minagano, David, for the various conversations over the course of the year. And we'll look forward to more in the coming year. But for now, we can leave it there.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. It's a great conversation.